Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Liana and I am a photographer and content creator. I work in the travel space. I have a blog, Instagram, TikTok, and now a YouTube. I also sell my prints on Etsy. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a background about who I am, how I got here, just so we can kind of connect on another level. So if you come to my channel and you're like, who is this girl? You can kind of get a good idea of where I'm coming from and how I got here. I guess let's just get right into it. I grew up in Seattle, Washington in a little neighborhood called Ballard. I was lucky enough to have a really happy family life. We went camping, road tripping all over the state, up into Canada, where I actually am right now, but when I was younger, and it really introduced me to the outdoors, and I just felt really lucky to be in the Pacific Northwest. And then as I got older into middle school and high school, just like I'm sure you've experienced, people started to ask me, like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to be when you grow up? The classic question. And I wanted to be a dolphin trainer, just as every 8-year-old would want to be. But as I got a little bit older, I remember somebody started to tell me that, dolphin training isn't maybe all it's cracked up to be. So I decided to switch my what do I want to be when I grow up to an interior designer. And that may seem like a bit of a random switch, but hear me out. My dad was a product designer, so I grew up watching him work on his CAD programs and design products for companies. So I really came from a background where that was really normal, and it felt really true to me, like as a 10-year-old who loved to draw and who loved to redecorate her room. And I just thought, well, that seems like such a fun profession to do. But let's rewind a little bit. So I am a photographer, as you know from the previous introduction, and maybe you're wondering where that started out. So I started having cameras when I was probably like 10. I got those little like power shoots and like handheld video cameras, and I would make scrapbooks with my friends, and we would go like play and run out in the woods, and I would like take pictures of them. And then as I grew up, I remember sophomore year of high school, my friend got a DSLR, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a camera like that, and I was just so impressed. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like I want one immediately. Like, all the photos we're taking are so much better than my little point and shoot. So I asked my parents if they would buy me one, and they said they would split the cost. So I saved up and paid $250 for my first little Nikon crop sensor camera, and I became the go-to like girl with the camera. Like, all my friends and I, if we would go out and have like a fun night out, just like going to dinner together, I would always bring the camera and take photos of them for senior dances or just like school dances. For like events in high school, I did cheerleading, so I would always bring my camera there, and I just kind of was the one to always do like the social events. So, but I didn't really know how to use this camera. Let's make sure this is clear. I was just on auto, and I was editing the photos in iPhoto or whatever, putting them on Facebook. We would use them for Facebook profile pictures and all that. Okay, so let's talk about the college years. I had a great time in college. I was really obsessed with design at that point in my life, and I had like a really good friend group, and I was a part of the Greek system. I was in a sorority. It was just a really fun time balancing like play and work. And then my sophomore year was when I started getting really into photography and asking my dad if he would like take me out and help me learn how to take photos, and I started asking more of my friends to go out and take pictures with me. So that was kind of like when I realized that I needed to actually do photography and like learn how to use a camera for real. So that was kind of the beginning of my big learning curve with photography. And then my junior year, I stumbled upon a book called You're a Badass by Jen Sincero, and if you haven't read it, I would 100% recommend it. It was life-changing for me. The main messages that I got from it were that your personal belief systems and the way you view your world creates your personal reality. So kind of law of attraction, manifestation, being an alignment type of information. And it was the first time I'd stumbled upon anything like that. And I remember seeing around that time some travel influencers pop up onto my Instagram feed. And at this point, it wasn't super popular. I think it was gaining in popularity. This was about 2015, 2016. And so it's the first time I'd seen people doing this, and I started stalking all of them, and I was like, how are they managing to travel this much? How are they paying for it? So a lot of my friends were like, oh, well, they're just trust fund babies, or they have money somehow. But as I looked into it more and more, I found out that they were actually making money from doing this, and I was so impressed by their photos. And like, the reason I bring up that book is that it coincided at the exact same time as I found those Instagram profiles, and it allowed me to think, like, if I could do anything in the world, what would I do? Would it be interior design, or would it be something like traveling and taking photos? And I think by seeing these people like kind of showcase that that was a possible career path, it really started to get my mindset changing, and I started thinking, like, how could I do something like that? So luckily, I was studying abroad this summer after I learned about that. So I started a blog called Seeking the Now, and I actually was writing about spirituality at that point. I think I told like a couple people in my Instagram, like personal Instagram, that I had a blog, but it was mostly for me. And I wrote in that blog the whole time I was in Italy. Now, this didn't really equate to like what I'm doing now, but it was the beginning of me thinking of creating like an online personal brand. So when I was in Florence, I was traveling, I was going to all these different places, and my attention started to be really turned from the design world that I was supposed to be studying, which I still was, but to these outdoor locations that I could photograph. So it was way more important to me to go out and take pictures and have my friends and I take photos of each other than it was to actually be working on my projects, which, you know, maybe as a student, that's not the best thing, but I do think I was really finding my passion during that time, and it was the first time I was able to travel by myself without my family, with friends. It was a very different type of travel that I was doing, and I was learning how to plan and go hiking in all these amazing places, see amazing cities. It was just really eye-opening for me, and I had such a blast. I was just like dreaming up, like, what could Seeking the Now become? Like, how could I turn this into a job? And at the same time, I was still doing interior design. So I get back to school. Around a month before I graduated, I decided to change my Instagram, my personal Instagram, to a photography Instagram. And I changed it from Liana to Seeking the Now. So this was actually a huge turning point for me, just internally. I think it was really difficult for me to get the confidence to change my whole like personal Instagram to this photography Instagram. And that may sound like kind of trivial to you, but I was in such a culture where people didn't really step outside of what was normal. Like, I was trying to do something very different, and while I was still in this environment that didn't cater to that. So I felt really judged, and I don't know if that was actually the case, but I felt judged by the general culture, and I felt really nervous to stand out. I had built my whole life before that on this idea of fitting in, as I had learned really young that it was safest to fit in, and now I'm doing something that had to force me to try and stand out and get people to see my work and put myself out there in a way that was really uncomfortable for me. So I ended up doing that, and it, I think, changed the way I viewed myself, because from this book I started to think, like, what would the character that I want to be in my life, what would she do? Like, who would she be? And I came up with a list of a bunch of adjectives, and it was like adventurous, confident, creative, artistic, well-traveled, brave. And so I started to try and see, like, how would that person act? And so I started to model my life after that. And that really continued into the summer after college, where I was taking my first photography road trip with my friend. I was asking my friends to go out and take pictures with me so I could post them on Instagram. I was thinking, like, who would this person be? Like, so if I was a travel photographer, I would go drive to the Olympics by myself, and I would take photos and landscape pictures, and I would get better. So I was doing that. I was watching YouTube tutorials, like delving into how do people make money from this, and I was really trying to embody that new version of myself and think like that person, act like that person. I ended up getting this job at an architecture firm called Perkins & Well. It was an amazing architecture firm. They are worldwide. It was downtown Seattle. It was kind of like my dream interior design job. I was really excited, and for the first 6 months I really liked it, but the 9 to 5 started getting really monotonous for me, and I had a hard time being told like what to do, and it was just difficult for me to be in this office situation where I had just a couple months ago been fully free to travel to the US. I had been fully free 6 months ago to like go travel around Europe, and all of a sudden I was stuck in this office life from 9 to 5 every day. I was having a lot of trouble with that, but at the same time I was growing my photography and learning more on the side. I would work every night on it. I would go out every weekend and shoot, and another photographer in the Seattle area reached out to me and asked if I wanted to go take photos with him and some friends at Mount Rainier for sunrise the next day. Luckily for me, these people were amazing. They were super nice, and I became friends with them, and it allowed me to see that like this freelance photographer thing is an actual thing that people do. They were traveling, they were completely in charge of their own schedule, and it seemed like the perfect situation for me. I was so like in awe of them, and I learned so much through hanging out with one friend in particular named Kyle. He taught me so much, and he introduced me to so many people, and I really got my foot in the door from that. And because he posted some photos of me, he had a rather large account, I started getting followers, and I started getting people who like wanted to shoot with me as well. So I started making all these friends in the photography world in Seattle, which was such a blessing for me because I still, before this, besides my like 2 or 3 close friends, I felt really disconnected from the rest of my like kind of peer group, because a lot of them moved from college and they moved to Seattle and they were still just going to the bars. That was kind of their like fun thing to do. It was a very different culture than what I wanted to be part of, so I was stuck kind of in the middle of like who I once was and then who I wanted to be. So when I met all these photography people, it kind of opened up this whole new world that I was able to feel comfortable being this new version of myself, and it really sped up my growth exponentially. So through Kyle, I met my friend Kelsey, and when I met her on this trail in Mount Rainier actually, and she had told me that she had quit her job about a year ago at that point, and I told her I was thinking about doing that as well, and she was like, you should go for it, just send it. So maybe like a month or 2 months later, I ended up quitting my job and going on a trip to Colorado, and then being like, well, I guess I just need to learn to make this work. Like I need to make money somehow, and I had not making any money from photography at that point. So I had no idea what I was doing. I ended up getting a little cafe job, and I started to build my business and figure out how you run a business. Okay, we're gonna stop here, and then I'm gonna go to the next location, and we're gonna talk about how I built that and how like I went from, that was 2019 when I quit my big corporate girly job, to 2024, which is now where I'm full-time and doing this. So let's go to the next location. Okay, let's talk about the final part of the story. When I quit my job at Perkins & Will, it was one of the craziest and most spontaneous things I've ever done, and it probably wasn't the smartest move at the time. I didn't have a ton of money saved up, and honestly I quit because I didn't have enough PTO and I wanted to go on a trip to Colorado. But there was also other things going on. I just wasn't excited about my job. They had told me it would take 10 years to get to the place that I really wanted to be at, and it just didn't seem worth it for me when I felt so trapped in an office environment, and I was seeing other people who were surrounding me as now peers that were doing something that I so desired to do. So I decided that lots of mosquitoes again, that in March of 2020, I would move to Australia for a year. So I got I think it's like a backpacker's visa, and I was going to go live there and travel around for a year and just like work odd jobs, but build my photography portfolio there and try and grow my Instagram a little bit more by traveling. As we all know, the pandemic came around and my plans to leave were totally done. Wasn't going to Australia. So I actually think it was a redirection in the right path that was actually meant for me. I ended up meeting my boyfriend, who I've now been with for 4 years and is amazing. I became really good friends with Kelsey. Like we grew our friendship a lot, and she became this amazing mentor to me and like really helped me see how she was doing things, because she was already doing social media and photography full time and to the travel influencer world. So it allowed me to like have a role model to follow and see her process, and that was amazing. I became better friends with my friend Disa, and all 3 of us would go hiking and backpacking. I would go rock climbing and mountaineering with my boyfriend. So at this time, Obviously, I couldn't work the cafe jobs during 2020, so I was just stuck at home, and I had saved up about $5,000 to go to Australia. So I had that money, and I used it once we were allowed to be free again, and I just road tripped around Washington, taking as many photos as I could. I probably went down to Oregon a bunch of times, and just tried to use that money to give myself an opportunity to build a bigger audience online. I think in 2020 I hit 10,000 followers, so I was kind of starting to get the ball rolling a little bit more, which was great. And then once my money ran out, I got a job at a retail store in Ballard. It was an outdoor store, and that allowed me to work kind of flexible hours, and it allowed me to work on my photography on the side and not feel super burnt out. So I did that for a while. I was doing freelance design work. I was occasionally getting photography jobs, and then I was building my Instagram. So after I quit that for a summer, I used the money that I'd saved up again to road trip all around the US. At this point, I was starting to go to Wyoming and different areas of the US, of the West mostly. And then finally my friends asked me if I wanted to go to Peru with them. And I really did, but I did not have the money to go to Peru. So I decided to get a real big girl job again, and I got a job at an interior design firm. And that interior design firm, I was a contractor. I was basically full-time, but it still allowed me the flexibility of not being on a full-time salary and a contract, and I could work from home a lot of the time. So I was working that job for around 6 months before Peru happened. And then Peru, I went for 3 weeks, and they knew this, so I kind of just closed out my projects and left. And then in Peru, I had this kind of crazy experience. And keep in mind, in the background, I had been going back and forth between, do I want to do photography? Do I want to do interior design? And you may think, Liana, you already quit interior design. But I really did love it. I loved the design world. I love just that whole process. And I thought maybe I'm just not in the right jobs. But this second job was at a smaller firm, and they were doing really cute projects and fun projects. And I still just didn't like the work. So my dad always says, for every job, there's a shit sandwich, and you have to decide which one you're gonna be willing to eat. So I was not willing to eat the shit sandwich for interior design. We got invited to a dome near Machu Picchu. It was a hotel, I can show it, and it was amazing. And the girl asked us if we wanted to do a plant medicine ceremony. And we were like, that sounds a little intense. And so she described that it would just be a cacao ceremony, which is raw chocolate, and it's heart opener, and it would just be under the stars, and that sounded really lovely. So we did that, and she actually pulled tarot cards for each of us and then kind of read our energy. She was I don't know what she was, but she was very intuitive. So for me, she was I'm getting the sense, keep in mind, this girl doesn't know me. I'm getting the sense that you're jumping between two things. It's probably about your career, and it feels like you're making pros, cons list, and it just seems like you really need to trust your intuition. And what I'm hearing is that when you trust your intuition, you will fly. Things will work out for you. You just need to jump. And my friends literally laughed because it was so on point for me. So I knew exactly what she was talking about, and I knew in that moment that I needed to pursue photography and this travel influencer world. So I got home, I got a DM on Instagram from a brand called Blue Banana. They're a Spanish brand, and they asked me if I would like to model for them in their next campaign, which happened to be in Norway, and it was 5 days from when I got the message. So I'd just gotten back from 3 weeks in Peru. They wanted me to be in Norway for another 3 weeks. They were gonna pay for everything, and we were going to all these amazing places. And so I actually did accept, and I quit my job, and the next day I left to Norway. And that was what kind of I feel the universe shoved me into what I was supposed to be doing in the nicest way possible. They basically hand delivered this amazing thing that Norway was top of my bucket list, but I probably couldn't have afforded it. And they just said do you want to go for it? Say yes. We're giving you the best thing you can think of right now. So I'm so happy I did, and ever since then I've been doing it full time. And I will say it has had its ups and downs, but now I live in Maui with my boyfriend, and I'm paying for life and making good money and actually doing the thing. I'm able to build my personal brand and do my own schedule and travel where I want to, and it's just been a really big blessing. But I will say that was probably like 5 years of working towards this. And I think people sometimes think it's going to be like an overnight success because they see people online. It's an overnight success for them. And for me, it wasn't. It was a lot of hard work, and I still feel like it is. It's a lot of just like practice and learning and growing, because like it's a lot of skills to learn. The business portion of it, like you are running every side of this business. The photography portion. Right now I'm learning video and trying to do YouTube, which is so like out of my comfort zone. And so I think it's just about really deciding what you want and then deciding you're gonna work for it no matter what. So I also believe in law of attraction. Like, I genuinely think I attracted a lot of these opportunities into my life when I was aligned with them. And it started by me acting as the person I wanted to be. So playing the character and deciding what type of character that was. What type of job did she have? What type of boyfriend did she have? Like, where does she live? What's her passions? What is she like? And just embodying that and trying to make choices that match that vision in the future. So I think it paid off. I'm really happy. I'm still growing and everything, but that is my whole story. And I'm being swarmed by mosquitoes right now. But I hope that you got something from this. Like, I hope that this story maybe inspired you, that it can work out for you, or it was just entertaining and you got to know a little bit more about who I am and how I got here. I'm excited to keep creating here on YouTube. I hope you guys come along for the journey. I will be sharing more and more, stop, mosquitoes, sorry. I will be sharing more and more content on here. I'm excited to kind of show my personality more and share my story with you and just share tips of life that I love. And I would love if you guys would comment if you got anything out of this. A little plug, I also sell my art on Etsy if you want to go check that out. It's really nice prints of the Pacific Northwest. I'm on Instagram, and I have a blog where you can find a lot of my adventure guides. I do a lot of travel guides on there, so it's a bit more informational, whereas I want this space to be a bit more inspiring and just like visually pleasing. So I'm excited to continue with this, and I hope you had a good time listening to my story. Okay, bye.